Hello again and welcome back to World Talks with me here, Anna Kalczyńska. As political landscapes shift and the Russian aggression doesn't show any sign of stopping, what will go down in history as a coalition of the willing is taking shape, bringing together like-minded actors with Britain and France as moving forces behind. Their founding goal was to prepare a response ahead of a potential ceasefire in Ukraine. But could it be that the ultimate consequence of the new coalition would be a more continuous and institutional cooperation? Let's join now with Melanie Sully, Director of the Institute of Governance. Good morning, Madam.
Yeah, good morning.
So let's start with a big picture. What is driving the coalition forward?
This coalition hopes that there will be soon peace in Ukraine, although they're not really quite sure. But if there is, they are convinced that it will not last too long before Russia recoups its strength and rearms and once again tries to invade Ukraine. And so for that future possibility, or as they see it, probability, they need to be ready and possibly ready without US support. So it was initiated by Britain and France, and other countries have indicated an interest, but actually who's willing in this coalition of willing to do what, we are not quite sure at this stage.
Exactly. Well, the first obstacle would be that Kremlin categorically rejects any possibility of European peacekeeping forces move to Ukraine. So Emmanuel Macron replied that it's up to Ukraine to decide and not Russia. But what happens if Donald Trump backs Vladimir Putin on that and backs his demand? What will happen then?
Well, this is the very critical thing, that if you have these forces, deterrent forces in Ukraine, what are they going to do? And if they are fired upon by the Russians to test their strength, can they fire back? That would be obviously a very critical situation. And really, until Europe is strong enough or feels it's strong enough to take on the Russians, then it would call Washington and say, can you help us? We're in a very difficult situation. And obviously, America at this point is saying, so you want us to come when it gets dangerous? And they're not very keen on that. But of course, they could provide some other kind of assistance like intelligence or some other help for Europe. We think that possibly because Trump is so unpredictable, he changes his mind from one day to the next, maybe he just has a new think about this and sees that it's in his interest to help Europe in that point. But it's all about interest with Donald Trump. If it's not in his interest, then he's not going to really lift a finger and he's off some other place. So this is a proviso which the coalition of willing, which is on paper, doesn't know how it would work out in practice.
Right. The coalition of the willing is formed by mostly NATO countries, but will not include all NATO states to avoid a potential veto from countries unwilling to contribute. So isn't it by definition a blunt proof of NATO weakness?
Well, it is fundamentally fueled by NATO countries, but they want to. There's also a dispute about that within this coalition, whether it would have a UN mandate or not. If it had a UN mandate, then it's a completely extra kind of operation. So we have other countries who are interested, Australia, New Zealand, for example. Now, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and UK, US are also in the Five Eyes. It's an organization which for a long time collects intelligence and analyzes it. And this is also a very important contribution. So at the moment, it's not clear what it would do, but it's a sort of embryonic stage to combat future Russian aggression.
How about the latest report by Financial Times, who wrote recently that EU leaders, namely Britain, Germany, France, plan to, and the Nordics, want to make a plan for 5 to 10 years to make up for a possibility of US withdrawal from the alliance. So how realistic is such an approach?
Well, it has to be done, I suppose, in the wake of the U.S. departure, leaving a void. We have been living for a long time with a peace dividend since the end of the Cold War, meaning we could spend less on defense and more on welfare and other things. And now this wake-up call. Trump might not be there in 4 years, but it's still left Europe very nervous and saying we have to stand on our own feet for the future. And it's quite possible that this deterrence force, we don't know where it will be located. It could be in Ukraine. It could be someplace other than Ukraine. But if it's in Ukraine to guard ports, cities, critical infrastructure, then these troops are going to have their own infrastructure. They're going to have to live somewhere. This is all just in the planning stage, but it would involve a huge amount of cost and also a lot of coordination amongst European countries and with Ukraine. And if Russia says, we don't want this, Macron from France is saying, well, we're going to do it anyway, because Ukraine is a sovereign country, whether Moscow likes it or not.
As you said, the world geopolitical paradigm has changed from a liberal, democratic, idealistic to a cynical, self-interest oriented, isolationist even. So the blow came from the US, as it happens. And in this new reality, what's the future for a bureaucratic, over-talkative European Union? My question is, will the European Union survive this shift?
Well, I think the European Union is in a bit of a crisis. Like most of Europe is very nervous because they didn't really reckon with this scenario, although they should have. And so they're now going to the other extreme, I suppose, and going on an armaments and war economy footing, in effect, a transition to. But also the European Union is within it very free trade, but outside protectionist. The United Kingdom is outside the European Union and has a whole lot to offer on defense and equipment. But the European Union is saying we're not buying from the UK. It's outside the European Union. We want French interests, or the French are saying we have our defense industry. And so long as that kind of mindset persists, then it will be very difficult to coordinate. And countries like Italy, are saying we don't see any need for the coalition of the willing. This could also be done by Article 5 and NATO. I think at the moment there is a phase in which European Union has to really calm down a bit, and Europe as a whole, to take stock of what really is possible in the future.
And how solid do you think is the foundation for this coalition of the willing? What's the potential of this coalition to stick together, to stick to its goals?
Well, I think the threat from Russia, the external threat, is what unites it at the moment, and that could drive it forward. But they're not even sure at the moment, in the light of recent statements, that there in fact will be a peace anytime soon. But they're still going ahead with this plan. I think that will not stop them because they've been so derailed by the fact of President Trump's statements.
Well, let's see what's going to happen next week. So far, this is like probably a calendar, observing the calendar. We are seeing the meetings on Mondays, on Thursday, and it goes on weeks after weeks. Yeah. So we will see what happens next. But thank you so much for your comments, Madam. Melanie Sully, Director in the Institute for Governance, has joined us this morning here on TVP World. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching. This is TVP World. Please stay tuned.